dear friends here. This is also, as you said, a concrete result of the work that sometimes we do silently, but with good outcomes. So glad to hear you here. Let me touch upon a few points you raised. I've noticed an overwhelming feeling of ownership in this House. That is something good, on which I count, because as some of you mentioned, this has been a collective work that now requires a collective follow-up to make sure that we move from the vision into the actions. First of all, some asked whether we stress more the values or the interests, and whether we define more as an important element of our action in the future our values or our interests. The ground of the strategy, the clear indication of the strategy is that our values and our interests coincide very much. There is one element on our values that the strategy underlines, which is that to make our action consistent, we have to be true to our values, first of all, in our internal policies and in our own behaviour. And this is something that echoes also some of the elements that some of you underlined. Any global strategy starts at home, and any external credibility is rooted in our internal strength. And this is why, in these difficult moments for the European Union, it's so important that we think of our common responsibilities towards our citizens and towards the rest of the world. Second, I was saying values and interests here coincide. Think of the resilience that is so much at the centre of our strategy, as was mentioned in the first intervention. Resilience of societies around us is indeed an investment in our own security. And when we mention resilience of societies in the strategy, we do not mention the strength of institutions only, but we mention the resilience of societies as such, which includes the space for civil society, human rights defenders, and the place for every citizen in its own society. Is this responding to our values only, or this is also responding to our interests? I believe, and the strategy reflects this common indication, that in this case, as well as many other cases, following our values also responds to our interests, and we would do a mistake if we were to put this in contradiction. Third, I would like to refer to one point that a couple of you raised, one in a negative sense and another one, Danjean, in a positive one, on the so-called train and equip, or capacity building on security and development. It is true, it took us 3 years to come to that. Yesterday the College, as you might know, adopted the package on capacity building on security and development. And let me tell you very clearly, this is not at all a diversion of our development tools into a security or military approach. On the contrary, this is a response to what especially our African friends, not only governments and institutions, but also civil society, are telling us, that if in a territory, being it in the Sahel, being it in Nigeria, being it in the Horn of Africa, if in a territory you have a lack of basic security conditions for the populations, you can do all the development you want. First of all, it doesn't get there, and second, it is not effective at all, because the first basic right to security has to also be guaranteed. This doesn't mean that, again, we are diverting resources from one chapter to the other. This simply says that we need to use our resources in a coherent way and respond to the needs of the populations we're working with. And all the messages we're getting are in this sense, that we need to also work on security as we continue to work on development. We always say there is no security without development, there is no development without security. It's now also a matter of turning this into practice, and so that is why I think that the package we adopted yesterday is something that's going to be extremely important in our capacity to implement also part of this strategy, using our different instruments, keeping in mind that they are different and covering different areas, but in a coherent and integrated way. I will receive a specific question on part of the strategy that refers to the fact that member states can be asked or tasked to actively contribute to specific common foreign policies that are determined altogether. It is a part of the strategy that was carefully thought of, as you can imagine, and it responds to the fact that on one side we need to keep the unity not only of the 28 member states but also of different institutions, including this parliament, and this is what is done in the framework of the common institutions, but there might be occasions where we might want or we might need or we might want to encourage one or a group of member states, or why not some parliamentary delegations, to complement the work that altogether we do. There can be specific added value that one or the other can bring. The important thing is that this is done in a coordinated manner with a clear, transparent link to common decisions and with common approaches and reporting back to the common instances. So I would never be afraid of initiatives, being that of parliamentary delegations, being that of group of member states, being that of group of commissioners that I lead quite often in our partners or in other countries. The important thing is that all of this is in a common framework and towards a common goal. We do not have to be afraid of our added value, even when it is a partial one. The important thing is that this is part of a coherent and concerted policy. And here I come to the basic need we have now. Many of you mentioned that. The basic needs we have now is to guarantee that the European citizens are guaranteed their right to security. And this requires the European Union to act as a European Union united. So there is one thing that I would not follow, one suggestion I would not follow that one of your interventions mentioned. Some of you said there is the need, it was not mentioned in the English language, there is the need to take more into account opinions that are contrary, that are opposed to working more together. You have to listen to those that say the European way is not the way. I am sorry, but I'm not going to hear that voices in this field, because if there is one field where it is self-evident that the security of the European citizens require European action, is our work in the world. There is no single field in our external action where one member state alone, being it the biggest, the strongest, the richest, the smaller, is more effective alone than all together. There is not one single thing, being it counter-terrorism, being it trade, being it development, being migration management. There is not one single issue where we are stronger alone than stronger together. And I believe our citizens in this field see it very clearly. Threats are global, opportunities are global. Our countries, all of our countries, compared to the rest of the countries in the world, are small-sized countries, maximum medium-sized countries. We're not living in the era of empires anymore, since a couple of centuries, and we have to wake up to reality. Our strength is our European Union in the world, and our partners around the world see it very clearly and recognise our strengths in the world. What we sometimes do not do is to recognise their strength inside our union. But we have to come out of this sort of depression we are entered and make use of our strength, because you can be strong, but if you don't know you're strong, you don't use your strength, it's useless. So I hope that we can indeed, as some of you said, use the strategy to turn our common vision and action into those of a self-confident global player. I think this is the basic thing we have to do now. I've noted that some of you said this strategy has is too ambitious and unrealistic. Others have said it's too realistic and not ambitious enough. We need both. We need both realism and ambition, also because we're seeing this these days. Things change. Internally and externally, things change in a way that was unforeseeable just a few months ago or years ago. The point here is whether we want to react to a change that is produced somewhere else, or if we are confident enough to try and shape the change that is happening around us. And I believe that we have all the tools, all the strength, if we have the political will, to do it exactly as our citizens have an interest in us doing this. Thank you, and we move to the next, but this is for the President to say.
Indeed, that is for the President to say. Damit ist diese Aussprache geschlossen und, wie die Hohe Vertreterin schon gesagt hat, kommen wir dann zum nächsten Punkt der Tagesordnung. Und zwar handelt es sich dabei